GG everyone, and welcome to the second great game you forgot about, the series where we look back at the great and the good of video games past to remind us all of the great games that through neglect, controversy or apathy, we all forgot about. And funnily enough, this one's a sequel too. The early 2000s were a weird time for video games. Those of us who had grown up with the likes of Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot and Pokémon were starting to hit our emo years. That time in your life when the teenage angst gets a little too much and the old cartoon gaming capers you used to enjoy just aren't cool anymore. Thankfully for us, Naughty Dog were hitting their emo phase at about the same time, so they grabbed their most recent console mascot candidate in Jak and Daxter, pumped the main character full of dark eco, and got to work making the most whiplashy sequel in the history of gaming. So join us as we steal a zoomer, pull out our Peacemaker, and make merry hell in Haven City. This is why Jak II is one of the best games ever made, and doesn't deserve the bad rep it sometimes gets. Well, first of all, Jak can turn into a dark eco-fueled demon boy with superpowers, so really that's all you need to know. But if you insist on diving deeper, how did this turn into this?
I'm gonna kill Praxis!
Well, you've got to look at Jak II in the context of the time it came out. GTA 3 had just released to rave reviews, so every studio was looking at emulating that success. The PS2 was in its heyday, and plenty of gamers, myself sadly included, had decided they wanted something a bit more grown up, violent, and full of guns. And so Jak II double jumped onto the scene as part of the collective action platformer emo phase of the early 2000s that included the likes of Sly Cooper, Ratchet & Clank, and to a lesser extent even Crash Bandicoot. But we're not going to talk about that. Thankfully though, everything that we loved about the original Jak and Daxter game is still here. There are your classic tight platforming sections that flow so easily and really complement Jak's skill set. The great writing and Naughty Dog's classic sense of humour is as rock steady as ever, and the quality animations and voice acting introduced in the original are still there for all to see in Jak II. Jak and Daxter is lovingly remade for a new generation of players, and the sequel is faithful to its platformer roots, just with its own unique dark eco-tinted style and feel. The core platforming experience is largely untouched, and you can still bob about with your standard array of double jumps and roll jumps to get around, but now instead of riding a haphazardly put together zoomer or a flut like the first game, you have guns, carjacking, a sweet hoverboard to ride around on, and a huge hub world of a city that feels lived in and fun to explore, especially by PS2 game standards. And the ability to just zoomer-jack any vehicle you come across to traverse the city, including those belonging to the Crimson Guard, complete with built-in blasters, means it's always fun to travel from mission to mission. And speaking of blasters, the gunplay in Jak II is a massive reason why it's so much fun to play. Jak II's combat system is essentially the same as the original Jak and Daxter. You can punch, spinny kick, and floor slam just like before, but this time Jak's packing some heat under his tunic. Armed with 4 different gun mods, each with their own specific situational utility, by the end of Jak II, our titular renegade is equipped with the firepower to deal with any threat. The scattergun will deal with small up-close skirmishes, the blaster is a great all-rounder, the Vulcan Fury is the perfect sweeper for dealing with big groups or isolating the strongest enemies, and the Peacemaker is exactly what you need when you absolutely have to kill everything in the room. With so many options to play with, every fight in Jak II can be different and swings on how you make the most of the weapons you have, and you're going to want to master them because this game gets hard when it wants to. The third mission of the game has you battling it out with a telepathic tank that knows exactly where you're going to be at any time, and the Get Seal piece at Water Slums mission was quite possibly the biggest difficulty spike I've ever encountered in the game. The combat always feels fair though, that one mission aside. I hope whoever designed it steps on Lego, and any death usually serves to teach you exactly what you need to do next time to make sure you make it to the next checkpoint. And the enjoyable gameplay loop of working out how best to deal with encounters means that any frustration is tempered by all the fun you're having in between missions. And a lot of that fun can be placed squarely at the feet of Jak II's next great feature, the colourful cast of characters that call Haven City home. We've got the lovable goofball, tough freedom fighter with a heart of gold, another tough freedom fighter with a heart of gold, the rough and ready hunter with a heart of gold, an old lady and her pet bird, and our personal favourite gang lord who openly tries to eat our friend. All jokes aside, without the likes of Torn, Ashlyn, Sig, Onin and Pekka, Crew and Vin absolutely stealing the show at times, Jak II's story just wouldn't be as strong as it is, and the overarching narrative is possibly Jak II's greatest bullet in its scattergun. It's hard to pull off a decent time travel story, and by the precursors there have been a lot of games and movies that have screwed them up in the past, but Jak II's is stellar all the way through. Essentially, and beware spoilers for a game that came out in 2003 right here, Jak was originally born in Haven City as the rightful ruler, but had to be sent back in time as a child to escape the attention of the Metalhead leader and his armies so that he could grow up and learn the skills he needs to be the man who eventually defeats the Metalhead leader in the present. If you've got a nosebleed right now, don't worry, it all makes sense on a playthrough. And there are some seriously compelling villains standing in Jak's way to prevent him from fulfilling his destiny. Baron Praxis is the perfect tyrant, and despite Jak's efforts at revenge for the Baron corrupting him with Dark Eco experiments, it's not even you that gets to kill him in the end, ultimately making a folly of Jak's original motivation at the start of the game in the wake of a much bigger threat. Jak II also features one of the best about turns for a character in a generation of video games in the reveal that Core, the kindly old man you meet at the very start of the game, is actually the Metalhead leader and has been pulling the strings the entire time. The game gives you just enough on Core to suspect that all might not quite be what it seems, but if you as a 12-year-old saw this reveal coming, you were a smarter cookie than me. And the subtle hints the game sprinkles in every now and then make subsequent playthroughs even more fun as you find yourself pointing at the screen like Leo DiCaprio, wondering how the hell you missed it the first time. It'd also be remiss of me not to mention the difference that voice acting makes to the entire Jak II experience. Giving Jak a voice after he was a mute in the first game was a massive risk, but ultimately it paid off because Naughty Dog went hard on making every single character and voice unique and memorable. Jak, Daxter, and every single character they interact with are brought to life by a level of performance that was rare for 2003, and it simply adds the glob of Dark Eco icing on top of the Dark Eco infused cake that is Jak II, and elevates it to one of the best games of the PS2 era. Is it perfect? Well, no, of course it's not. Guns don't always cooperate when you try and aim them, vehicles can feel difficult to control at the best of times, and it's way too easy to either crash your zoomer or accidentally hit a guard and end up in a police chase. I mean, honestly, who runs Haven City's Department of Transport? Because I've got some questions. But Jak II has been a controversial game for far too long. It's time to acknowledge just how great this sequel was, even if it did give those of us who played the first game a little bit of whiplash on release. It's been 13 years since we last got a Jak and Daxter game. God, I'm old. And the less said about Lost Frontier, the better. Now that Naughty Dog have sorted the latest Last of Us remake, maybe it's time they looked a little further into their back catalogue. So which great games do you think everyone seems to have forgotten about? Drop your suggestions down in the comments. Leave a like if you think Jak II deserves more love, and Naughty Dog should get to work on Jak and Daxter 4 already, and subscribe to make sure you catch our next episode on a game that we'd literally walk through hell for. Thanks for watching.